The Cold Hard Truth now has your Premier access with Premier Panton.
Hello everyone, this is Wayne Panton. Come and join me on Cayman Road's Premier Access every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. for a frank and open Q&A session. I'm here to answer your questions about the issues that concern you the most. Tune into YouTube and Facebook Live on Wednesday. We will see you there.
Full transparency, answering your questions, down to earth, accountable, and accessible to who matters. You. Don't miss Premier Access on the Cold Hard Truth, spilling the tea like no one else.
Okay, good evening. I've got, my apologies, was having a little pre-dinner snack. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ms. Elizabeth. Good evening, Ms. Emma. How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Premier Access with Premier Wayne Panton. We're waiting on him to come on the program. He should be joining us shortly. I'm sure, as you guys appreciate, or as you can appreciate, he's very, very busy. So we really we're so thankful for him to commit to doing this twice a month so that, you guys can get a usual contact with him. You can ask your questions. Now, this evening, we do have certain areas that the Premier is going to focus on. I found that last time it was a great show, first of all. If you missed it, go back to our Facebook. We'll start putting it in. We try to organize a lot of the videos in playlist for you. So playlist just makes it easier to find. And then when you go into playlist, it'll jump straight from one item in the playlist to the next. So we will arrange a playlist for Premier Access so that it's just a lot easier to find a lot of this content as well. So we're going to be speaking with him today, and he wants to focus on some information about the boosters and COVID, and of course, also talking about his budget. So one of the big things that the government did since they got elected that they've been working on for many, many months leading up to December before they took a break for Christmas is trying to get the budget passed and putting together, all of the budget documents and supporting documents that make that process happen. And to be quite frank, I was emailed the documents by GIS, and it's a lot of information. Trying to break down some of it on this evening's show. Should he answer your questions about what the PACT government has done thus far from a budgetary standpoint and perspective to try to make the lives of Caymanians easier financially? And trust me, it's tough right now for a lot of people. I had a young lady yesterday reach out to me. Sometimes it's family situations that are preventing people from financially being okay, which is really, really unfortunate. So in other words, there might be other people in the family who can assist them, and they're not doing that. And I don't know, kind of why that isn't happening in this particular family. And a lot of people feel really bad about having to even ask for help because they do not want people to look on the family and say, well, why aren't your family members helping you? Because that's the natural thing to do, is just to start asking some questions. But this young lady, I spoke to her. She's a mom, a wife. She's got a husband. Unfortunately, they're both unemployed at the moment due to some circumstances. He's got an interview. I think he's actually got a job offer on the table from government. And he's hoping that, you got to go through, listen, getting hired with government may seem simple, but it really isn't. All the medicals and this and that. And it takes a while to actually get into the position, and then that first month to get a paycheck, right? So quite frankly, she's waiting on that to happen to help alleviate their situation. And she's actively applying for jobs. But in the meantime, every single month, bills are due. And although she's staying with in-laws and she has a mortgage and a house that they'd started to build, her savings, I think, have been going towards covering that so far. She still needs, she sent a list, she still needs health insurance coverage paid, or I think it was life insurance, but she needs one of her insurance paid. She needs a phone bill paid, and she needs food. So trying to help her, with some of that. I have another young man, I think we had mentioned his situation before in the show, where he works for an employer and got injured on the job, and the employer has done nothing at all to assist him in any way in terms of, just getting him some sort of relief. He's not paying him. He hasn't paid any of his bills, like absolutely nothing. And that's creating a situation where he is also desperately in need, and he's been off on medical leave. It was quite a serious accident that he had, and he continues to struggle, with trying to find ways of supporting himself. So during the Christmas, we were able to get him some groceries and a good Christmas dinner. And he messaged yesterday saying that unfortunately, he's going back to the doctors, but he still hasn't gotten anything from his employer. He's trying to work with the landlord to see how she can assist with the rent. And guess what? He still needs to eat. So he's asking for some groceries again. So we're doing as much as we can with what we have available. We're not an NPO by any stretch of the imagination. We're just trying to help. We're just trying to be good citizens and good people and help out in any way that we can. So during the Christmas holidays, there's some private people who came forward who were able to provide food vouchers, and they reached out to me and said, tell me some people who are in need. And we had gave some lists for those individuals. And I think that that was a very helpful situation. But guess what? People continue to be in need, especially when you cannot work or you're unable to work, whether it's because of illness or you've been unable to find employment. That really, really makes your life incredibly difficult. And I don't know if you've ever been unemployed, folks, but it doesn't take much, like 1 or 2 months, even if you've been working for years and years and years. Most of us simply do not have a sufficient amount in our savings account to carry us for more than a couple months in the event of a serious illness, loss of job, and that sort of thing. So the PACT government has been working hard, and we're going to find out how they've been trying to help alleviate some of the financial strain. What are some of the programs that they have put in place? Now, on tomorrow's program, folks, make sure you tune in tomorrow morning, because we're going to have quite an interesting and fiery show for you. I was just working on that agenda. Some very, very interesting topics for tomorrow's program, including a hate crime in the Cayman Islands. As shocking as that may seem, it has happened. We're going to talk about some of the duty-free items, and we might get into this conversation with the Premier as well. They have acted upon a campaign promise to make certain items duty-free, but people are saying that they don't see the trickle-down effect. In fact, they see the opposite, where the prices are increasing. And on tomorrow's program, we're also going to address this tick in all of our backsides by the name of Lovell. So yes, that will be a no holds bar kind of show. So make sure you tune at 7:30 for that. So good evening to Tracy. Good evening, Wee Wee. Aliano, thank you so much for joining us. Larry's joining us from New York. Minister Kenneth Bryan is joining us from the UK. Felicia, good evening to you. And I do see that the Premier is now ready. So let's go ahead and welcome him to the program. Good evening, Premier Panton. How are you?
I'm good, Sandra. Good evening to you, and good evening to all of Cayman, including as far away as the UK, and probably some other places that will get identified. But good evening to everyone. I hope everyone has had a very safe and happy holiday period. And you know, we're starting 2022 with a huge amount of potential, a lot of good things that are planned, and I think, you know, the country is in a good position, and we're going to be able to move forward and deliver on our promises for the people of this country on the basis of our budget, which, as you know, comes into effect came into effect January 1st.
Yes. So I see you're getting all your little tech gear there sorted. You are working late. Again, I can say that that's your government office, not your constituency office. Right. And so hopefully there'll be no power outages this evening.
No, I'm hoping that we won't have any issues. But
tell them to keep the lights on. Don't put you in the dark. So Miss Bonnie's here joining us from East End. She says, good evening to Wayne Panton. Aliano says, talking on the issue, says expats need to manage their exit strategy better and have a means to support themselves so you can leave. Yeah, that's not what this situation is, Aliano. This is someone who's actually injured on the job, and the employer is refusing to pay them whilst they're injured, and meanwhile they've got mounting bills and so on that are accumulating. So I think at this point they probably want to seek some advice on what can be done. But thank you, Premier Panton. Happy New Year. This is our first Premier Access program of 2022. It kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. This morning I was like, "Ooh, today's January 5th already." So,
snuck up on me too.
Yeah. So here we are. So first of all, I suppose in this day and age, we can't really have a conversation with any leaders of any countries anywhere in the world without having to address COVID. I saw the latest numbers that came out tonight. And in fact, we now have some suspected cases of Omicron reaching over 500. And I think I had explained previously to people that by the time they say that those are suspected cases, it's pretty much, we're just waiting on the final confirmation, but it looks like that's the case. So What has been the trends? Have you gotten any information on how we're doing in terms of Omicron so far? It seems like the hospitalization numbers, though, are staying relatively low. So I guess
Yes,
that's a good sign.
yes. Well, I guess in general, I think people have. My gut feeling is that, and from what I've observed, and from what I think the numbers are telling us, is that
Hmm.
people have generally adhered to the health protocols. We have not had this, real exponential growth of Omicron in the way that was certainly possible, and the way that has been reflected in many other countries. That's not to say that we aren't going to have that. We've had the benefit of having schools out, um, but of course we've also had people in a more festive mood and having get-togethers and that sort of thing. So it's I think right now we're probably not in a bad position.
Hmm.
The numbers are a lot less than they could be. Obviously, we'd like them to be less than where they're at, but it's understandable given this time of the year that we've just come through the holiday period. As you noted, one thing that's really important is the hospitalization numbers.
Hmm.
Um, and we're quite low there. I think we have four. I can't remember if it's three or four at HSA, and I think we have another one at Health City HCCI. So it's the numbers are actually quite good in terms of those who are in hospital. We do not at this point have anybody that is, um, you know, really in um, ill health. I think obviously they're sick enough that they're in hospital getting the support, but we don't have anybody that's ventilated at this point, and those are always pretty good indications. So
Hmm.
overall, our numbers are pretty good. Um, Obviously, we'd love to have them as low as possible all the time, because at the end of the day, this reflects real people, um, with real impacts on families. And it's for us, it's not just statistics, it's people that we know and love.
Absolutely. And we had mentioned just last week, in fact, that, we had, unfortunately, another COVID death. I think that was number 12. And we, had to report on that. And I saw a few people got upset because we were reporting that, unfortunately, this person was unvaccinated. And some people said, well, why did you have to say that? And I said, well, it's a matter of fact. And I think that I would have expected us to recognize at this point in time that, in terms of reporting from the media perspective, and even from governments, vaccination stats includes unvaccinated numbers, who's vaccinated, who isn't, who's kind of booster percentages. And it's just one of the things you have to report when someone has died and they're COVID positive as a COVID, related death as well. So I'm not really sure why people are getting particularly, in their feelings about it. But again, I want to remind people that of the 12 people who've died, 11 out of the 12 have been unvaccinated. So I think that that speaks volumes to the level of protection that, even on this small island, that we've
Yes.
gotten from the benefit of having people vaccinated.
Yep. No, look, let's not shy away from the truth.
Mhm.
The truth is the people that are being impacted the most by the virus and any of the variants are are the people who are unvaccinated. The
Mhm.
people who are getting the sickest typically are unvaccinated. The vast majority of the people who are unfortunately, we are losing are unvaccinated. And we can go, as I said to you, we get daily updates, and sometimes I get updates at night and first thing in the morning.
Mhm.
And I we will go for days and sometimes weeks, and have all people in the hospital being unvaccinated.
Mm.
So we can't deny that reality. I mean, I don't know today. I'd have to go and look at it. I don't remember offhand, but I would say that at most we have one person possibly.
Mhm.
Hold on, let me just look at it very quickly, and I can tell you. No, we have 3 people in hospital today. This is today's numbers. 3 people in hospital, and all 3 are unvaccinated. So it reminds me of the book and the documentary that was done by Al Gore called "An Inconvenient Truth." It
Mm.
is an inconvenient truth for people
Mhm.
who believe that or that the vaccinations are not the way to go. Um, but the reality is, if you are not vaccinated, you stand a much higher chance of getting infected, and you stand a much higher chance of getting ill. Um,
Right.
and if you obviously you have to get ill in order to run the risk of um of it being fatal. And we don't want that. We want our people as safe as possible. This is not something that we can escape from, not something we can get away from.
Mhm.
The country was locked down for 14 months. Everybody at all parts of the political spectrum had the view that we needed to open up. And
Right.
opening up necessarily meant that we would have to have exposure to COVID.
Mm. Mhm.
Now, so anybody that believes that somebody else could have opened up the country without having exposure to COVID is in a different universe. They're not dealing in reality. And I think what we focused on was trying to push the vaccination rate as high as possible. And I think the reality that was the right thing to do has been proven, has been demonstrated. We have nearly 10,000 people who have been infected in
Mhm.
Cayman, and we've only had 12 people who have unfortunately lost their lives. And I say only guardedly, in the sense that, you know, I recognize that each one of those people are individuals that have families and many of us may have known and loved and cared about them. Um,
Mm.
and this is not the end. We don't know where um, this thing will end for us. Hopefully, we are on a path which puts us in a better position as we progress through this year. But we are actually, if you just look at the statistics, the cold hard facts, or truth, as you say, um, if you compare us to other overseas territories that have had similar numbers, many of them have not even had similar numbers of infections, but have had 10 times the number of deaths. Um,
Mm.
and that, to me, that is a stark reflection of our reality, that the vaccines work. And I want to say, I don't think it should pass, Sandra, without us acknowledging that today is the 12-month anniversary of vaccines first arriving in Cayman.
Yes.
It is the 12-month anniversary of vaccines first
Mhm.
arriving in Cayman. And so, I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. We all have to be eternally grateful to the UK for prioritizing the supply of vaccines to its overseas territories. I think it was probably pure coincidence that it happened to be Cayman first, but we were the first overseas territory to receive
Mhm.
um, their supply of vaccines, and we were therefore able to, I think within a short period of time it was supplied to others as well. But we may have had a slight head start in terms of days, um, but we have certainly achieved a very high rate of vaccination, and I think that has served us really, really well. And I want to thank again the people of Cayman, and all those people who have who have stood out there, my colleagues, who have all pushed and tried to get people to get vaccinated, because this has been our key to where we're at, without having a lot more deaths. We could be in a much worse position. I think
Yes.
we're, as I said, I'm never comfortable, saying that this is success. But relatively speaking, we are in a much better position and we've had a lot less pain, let me put it that way, than other territories have had, with and that is even reflecting on the fact that they've had less in the way of infections.
I didn't realize actually that it was a year already, so it's quite interesting. We had our own Kevin Watler on the show this morning. He's actually turned out to be COVID positive after his roommate came down with the infection.
Oh,
but thankfully, he got his booster shot, I want to say from October, so he was boosted up pretty early so he's having the equivalent of basically a cold. That really isn't that bad. But I was at lunch today, and I was kind of just sitting there having a salad all by myself. I thought, I'll grab a quick lunch, and I overheard out of the peripheral of my ear two ladies speaking, and I heard them talking about vaccines and talking about boosters and stuff with kids. And I really wasn't paying that much attention, but I kind of looked sideways at one point. One of the ladies, she could be American or Canadian, she said, "Oh my God, are you Sandra?" And I was like, "Well, that depends on who you are." But and we chatted for a little bit, and her friend was like, "Who the heck is Sandra?" She's like, "You don't know Sandra from Caymanians." And then she said, "Thank you so much for the work that you have been doing as it relates to vaccines." And I thought, sometimes I don't even appreciate how much we have tried to put out as much information as possible, accurate information, having experts on, and that really it has reached a lot of people, and people have been paying attention. Because I always find that the naysayers, the anti-vaxxers, they tend to be extremely vocal. So you feel like they represent a much larger group than they actually do. But I want to say to that young lady, I didn't even make note of her name today, but thank you for acknowledging that. And there's so many people out there from public health, from the HSA and other agencies who are really working around the clock and working hard to make sure that we have access to the vaccines at what I think has been a pretty, amazing schedule. Every single month, folks, the schedule is coming out and it's being made available, and you can go get your booster. And I see now they're doing the boosters by alphabetical name. But, you can get your boosters. You can get, if you haven't yet gotten your vaccine at all, you can also get those almost every single day, as well as them handling PCR testing and all that sort of stuff as well. So, I wanted to say thanks to them, because I know they always get to hear all the negative stuff, but sometimes they don't get to hear just a simple thank you.
Yeah,
but we've already got a number of questions coming in. So someone did make an observation that the vaccine numbers are they're at 82% for the first dose, but that second dose is kind of stuck at 80%. It seems like that second dose takes a while to actually move. I don't know mathematically why that is, but I remember it being like, it seems like it was forever that it was at 79. And then eventually it got up to the 80%, that we had been pushing for. There's some speculation that it might actually be above the 80%, because the early indications from the ESO is that maybe the population numbers are not as high as we thought. Do we have any sort of update on that situation?
I can only tell you the sort of preliminary update that I had. I think it was just before Christmas. The indication was that it was the population numbers were looking around just below 65,000, I think. But it was recognized that there was about 5% of the 5% of the household which remained to be dealt with. Now, I don't know. I still am not 100% comfortable that that it does actually reflect the accurate population numbers, even let's say we end up around 65,000 or 66,000. I'm still not 100% sure that we've, the methodology doesn't have some possible
A margin of error, basically.
gaps in there, a margin of error, which is more than anticipated. But it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever it is, if the number is actually lower than 71,000, then we have done a lot better in terms of vaccination than we have been noting and calculating. The gap between the first shots and the second shots always seemed to me to be, that it's always within like 1.5 to 2%, somewhere in that region. And you would think that as it gets closer to a point where there are less people, available to take it, that the second shots would catch up. But and I think it is, but it's catching up slower than I anticipated. And one other thing I do want to note is that, as I have said before, and as others have noted, we need to get people to have the booster shot. The booster shot is what is extremely important in relation to Omicron. It is not just, a third more shot, and a third more vaccine. It actually has a really significant impact. It has a demonstrated very significant impact on improving the level of antibodies and the level of protection you have from both infection as well as getting ill. So I think, and I'm going to ask people to please come out, get your booster shot. I have heard all kinds of reasons why people have been delaying in some cases. I've heard, I've got to find the best time. It isn't convenient. Let me tell you, the virus is in circulation, and it will come and it will infect you, whether or not you think it's a convenient time. Right. So it is really your responsibility as an individual to look after yourself, to protect yourself, and to help protect those around you that you love as well. Because if you're protected to some extent from catching it, then it minimizes the possibility you can pass it on to people that your family and people that you love and care about as well. So please, folks, let's get boosted up. Let's go out and get these booster shots. They're available. We also are in a position now where we can vaccinate kids that are considered vulnerable. We don't have the ability to do that generally yet, but I think that is coming. I think, as I've noted on the previous show 2 weeks ago, we were exploring two options, or let me put it another way. We're exploring an alternative in relation to the usual approach of having the UK approve it and provide the supply for us. At this point, it seems very, very likely that the UK approach, which has actually accelerated a bit, is going to get us there much quicker. We already have the ability to do vulnerable children, and those that are, I think, those that live in vulnerable or live in households with others who are vulnerable. And I think we're going to get to a point much quicker with the UK approving the general application to children between 5 and 11 than trying to go through the alternate source of a direct acquisition from Pfizer. So I'm very optimistic. I'm very grateful to the UK for that. We do have a lot of parents who have been asking for this approach. I would say we're also considering a lot of the other options, a lot of the other issues that people have found difficult, and that is, around the isolation periods and the issues around kids and children. Sorry, I always scold myself for saying kids. Children who are less than 5. So it is going to be easier for us, and the discussion is underway in terms of whether we can just regard children who are under the age of 5 as having the same vaccination status as their parents. Um, we are also having discussions around reducing the current public health protocol of 14 days for Omicron.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're also discussing the ability, our the potential to reapply the national lateral flow policy to those households that have Omicron as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we, although I can't predict the outcome on these things, I think we're going to have something more definitive by early next week, and by midweek, I think the country, maybe or maybe a little bit later, before the end of the week for sure, the country should be in a position where it is clear what direction we're taking on this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, Sandra, as you know, and we all know because many of us read very intently information on all these issues on a daily basis, if not hourly basis. Um, and there's a lot of information that's still coming out. You know,
Right.
we're learning more and more information all the time. A lot of a lot of countries are doing studies and doing assessments, and we're learning from others. So as we learn, our approach, or our approach, and the concerns and the issues and the way we address things will tend to evolve to reflect that level of knowledge that we have gathered from others, as well as the direct assistance and advice that we're given through the UK Health Security Agency. And of course, we have Dr. Olivia Newton here, or Tilia Newton,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, here with us as well. And I know that you'd like to have her on the show at some point.
Yes,
We'll
absolutely.
see if we can arrange that, because, and again, I want to say thank you again publicly, because yes, you have been doing a tremendous job with providing information on COVID, answering a lot of questions around vaccines, and the various issues that people have had concerns about. And very helpfully, you have been trying to address a lot of the misinformation that exists online, and that permeates the cyberspace, and in fact, the households of the average people today.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of people around me, not direct, well, even some family members, but not obviously not in my household, who have had incidents of Omicron and Delta,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people continue to be concerned and continue to be confused by a lot of the information or misinformation that's out there. So we have my office is having the clinic again on Monday,
Okay.
and I really want to encourage people to come out and join us there on Monday afternoon. It's not like going to the hospital. This is something that it's a treat. You get treated as if you're a family. You get refreshments, and we love having people come in and join us, and to be able to get a life-saving booster or start their course of vaccines. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I want to encourage people to continue to do. The last time I was there, I think I spent half the day there in my office in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
It was great to look out the window and start to see people line up there. And I probably could see down the road. I probably was looking at in excess of 75 to 100 people before the public health staff even arrived. And I'd like to see that again. I'd like to see a lot more of our people coming out and getting their boosters, and those who have not been vaccinated getting vaccinated, because it really does mean, the difference between life and death. We have had too many people who have passed away. We've lost too many members of our community who didn't need to die. And if they had been vaccinated, statistically,
it was very unlikely that they would have lost their life. So I want to encourage people to come out, get vaccinated, get boosted, and I look forward to seeing you there on Monday afternoon. Unfortunately, that's our usual scheduled caucus meeting, so I probably won't be there all afternoon, and I'm probably going to get there a little bit late. But when I get there, I want to see lots of people there getting their shots.
All right, folks. So we'll also repost the vaccine schedule for those of you who are interested in that. I did see Yvette asking, she said that she actually missed her booster shot today based on her last name. Can she get it tomorrow? I would say that they're probably not going to turn you away. But, as much as possible, I suppose, try to stick to the schedule. They're just trying to limit the numbers. Of course, one of the complaints that we're constantly hearing, folks, is that, there's too many people in line for PCR tests. There's too many people in line, for the vaccines. And there are concerns that those volumes could be putting people, I suppose, at risk. So I would say, Yvette, take your chances. They're probably not going to say no, but
I would tell her to do the same thing, to be perfectly honest. I've seen the indication of the name or alphabet based approach. But I don't think they're going to turn you away. I do think that that they are trying to control it for the reasons you have noted. But I will tell you that right now we are under 25% in terms of those people who are currently fully vaccinated, who have had their booster shots. And frankly, that needs to be higher. We need to have, I want to push that to 75% by, say, by early February at the latest. So please, folks, let's get this done, because it does make a significant difference. It really does ramp up your level of antibodies, and it really does ramp up your level of protection from getting ill.
I was just going to say, Yvette, having a look at tomorrow's schedule, I don't see where there's actually any concerns about you probably getting in trouble alphabetically, because they're doing the Prospect Community Office tomorrow. So that would be Sabrina Turner, and that looks like that's wide open from 4 p.m. until 7. But what I would say is just to get there early, because again, I think the community, which I believe is something that was started under your government, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but those community drives have been extremely important, because there are a lot of people who can't always get out. They might have issues like transportation issues or whatever. And if it's right there, they might be able to walk to the vaccine clinic or the constituency office. So I think it's fantastic having them available at the constituency level. So Nicholas reminds us that you can also go to 133 McClendon Drive, which is the next to DHL. That's the old, was it Woods Furniture Building? A lot of people might remember it as where the furniture store was.
Well, actually, yeah, I think so. I think that's what it is. It used to be the Woods.
It used to be, but that was quite some time ago. But yes, that's the location. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in. So let's go head to our questions. And then I know you wanted to spend some time this evening reviewing the budget that was just passed, that has just come into effect, and looking at some of the positive things that are coming out of that budget and things that will benefit Caymanians as well. But Luis wants to know if they're considering giving the nightclubs some more open hours. When the bars are okay, the nightclubs are dead, not being able to operate with those hours.
Well, this is always the challenge, right? We are trying to get a balance between protecting people's lives, minimizing the impact of infection in the community, and trying to get the livelihood of people improved as well. So it is going to be difficult to achieve a balance that everybody is happy with. And we have had some input from some of the operators, and the proposal, I think, we went through New Year's Eve where we did normal hours, and then we did, because Monday was the holiday, we did 12:01 a.m. on for the normal closing hours. During the week, we did that on that holiday, and then the going forward, as I understand it, the chair of the board has indicated to licensees that we would be having the normal midnight closing hours for the rest of the week until Friday, and then we'd have normal hours on Friday, and of course Saturday as well. But I think the indication that we've had is that is obviously better for both the bars and the clubs, but in particular the clubs. And at this point, we feel it's a reasonable balance. There are other countries, Sandra, as you know, and as I think anybody can see from headlines, where bars and restaurants and clubs are being shut down at 10 p.m., some 8 p.m. in other countries. We are in a lucky position where we can have some degree of normal business activity and normal social activity, subject to the protocols, subject to the health protocols, subject to to social distancing and wearing masks and sanitizing your hands. We have some degree of it, but we don't want to wait until we get to a position where we have an absolute necessity to get to close down and do what other countries have had to do, where you severely limit hours, and which severely impacts businesses. I mean, yes, I know it has an impact now, but something is better than nothing. Being in a position where you've got to take action, drastic action, is not a desirable position to be in. I think what we have going on right now is a reasonable balance.
Right. I was actually noticing that Hong Kong has, they were for the past 7 months kind of enjoying a relatively COVID-free existence, and that has now changed recently. And so today they've actually implemented some very strict measures, including blocking for the next 2 weeks travel from 8 different countries. So one question that I had received yesterday is there was a rumor floating around that the Cayman Islands, your government might be looking at reducing some of the incoming flights. Is that just a rumor, or is there any truth to that?
No, that is a rumor. We have not looked at restrictions. In fact, it's interesting that they are doing that. I guess it seems that most of China is pursuing a zero COVID.
Yes,
approach.
That's right.
So I think that is a reflection of China extending its further control over activities in Hong Kong. And of course, within the 8 countries, Canada, the UK, and the United States are included. So it's the approach that they have taken is very, very stringent, and China as a whole, we've had, just recently we've had examples of cities of between 3 million and 12 million who have had 3 or 4 cases, perhaps sometimes 15 or 20 cases with no, they're completely asymptomatic, and they lock them down and they test everybody, they test the millions of people. So they have taken a very, very hard line, a strong zero COVID approach in China. I don't know the extent to which they are providing support to their people and to businesses, but obviously it must be significant. It must be happening to some extent, because that is a very, very difficult policy to maintain without having, real impacts on people. And I have friends who live in China, who work in China, and get reports probably every few days, or if not every week, and it's quite interesting, that the one thing I suppose I haven't clarified is, I'm assuming that it hasn't come up because they are getting paid their salaries, but who is funding that? Maybe another thing, but certainly, they're taking very strong action, and they must be funding it. They must be providing support and subsidy in order for that to happen, because that represents really severe impacts, on the lives of people for such a long period of time. And I think that is why we've had so many issues around the world with supply line, uh, difficulties, and shipping costs, and escalation in the cost of shipping. So this is a case of, what happens in China is causing the rest of us, to feel the ramifications of it. As say before, if America sneezes, Cayman catches a cold. Now with globalization the way it is, and supply lines being very very linear like that, it tends to have a big impact on all of us around the world.
Yeah.
So they're doing everything they can to keep COVID out, but it's happening on everybody else. If they can afford to do it for as long as they want to do it, then good for them. I just don't see that. We're not all in that kind of position.
So, Amy, I think that question has already been answered as it relates to the isolation period and what government is, I think, kind of considering and mulling over, and as it relates to children. The Premier did mention that earlier. Sanya, good evening. She has a question. She said, can you please ask if they intend to change the quarantine for Caymanian kids? That was also answered. So that was part of the same answer. So possibly, but not yet, is the short answer.
Yeah, and I would say, just to clarify, I would say in relation to that it is at the moment we're talking about young children that are between say 4 and newborns, as opposed to those that are older, because they represent a lower degree of risk. They usually are less mobile. They're with their parents. If their parents are vaccinated, then it would be understandable and justified to consider them having them adopting, or being treated as adopting, the vaccine status of their parents.
Yep. Okay. Paula, good evening. Paula says, this might be off topic, but Mr. Premier, however, nonetheless, it's flesh and blood we're talking about. Kindly ask him if and when he will look into the matter of my grandson in Honduras. The child's father has given up and has no hope, taken any measures to assist to be able to get communication and see his child, but I have not given up and still continue to fight the fight. I believe government can do more instead of giving me the runaround. So I'm assuming you're familiar with this situation?
I think, yes, I am to some extent. But, I don't, we have a system of laws. We have rules that allow us to address what happens in our country. However, what is happening in other countries are a lot less under our own control. And it is difficult for us. It is difficult for government to be expected to solve issues where the parents, or one parent is desirous of not making themselves available to the process there or the process here. So it's something that I share the concerns, and I'm obviously very sympathetic, but it is not possible to provide some sort of guarantee that this issue can be resolved.
What happens? You're a lawyer in a former life. What happens when you start to? I mean, there's a lot involved in like child custody and
Right.
multiple jurisdictional, issues. We are not a sovereign country, so a lot of times, we rely on the UK government for certain things. But does the UK government still take an active role in trying to help resolve some of these issues, if possible?
Well, I think yes. I mean, I think to the extent that we get cooperation with the country that we're dealing with,
Mm,
and they'll, they can overlook the fact that we're a British overseas territory as opposed
right.
to a sovereign country, and they'll deal with us as if we're a sovereign country. Then that is fine. We can address these issues on our own. But in some instances, that is not possible. Some instances, we do have to have the assistance of the UK, and they are typically very responsive insofar as they can be helpful. Um, but as you say, these are very complicated issues. There are conflicts of laws issues, and I mean, you only have to look at the scenario, for example, with Julian Assange, who was, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy in London for
Mhm.
7 or 8 years now, um, and he was being pursued through the courts in the UK by the United States. It takes a long time for due process to occur.
Mhm.
And if someone can't be found to begin with, um, because the systems within the country perhaps are not conducive to, that happening very easily, then that delays the process even further. So it's a very sad situation. It can be a very sad situation, and it's a situation that people unfortunately have to be patient with. There's only so much that we can accomplish, even in interacting directly with the authorities in other countries. And sometimes they have limitations, and sometimes they have severe limitations based on their resources or lack of resources.
Mhm. Very sad. Well, Ms. Paul, I certainly hope that you can get some sort of, and she's been talking to me about it for quite some time as well. So I hope that she gets some sort of resolution to the situation. I was reading an article today in the Economist. I've only gotten kind of halfway down the article, but it said something that I thought was so interesting. It says that the new normal is already here and get used to it. It goes on to say that the era of predictability, which is the era of unpredictability, is not going away. So it was obviously in the context of COVID, with people thinking, oh, maybe COVID is just like going to be like the bird flu. It'll just one day just disappear and we'll get back to normal and we can continue living our lives pre-COVID. And this entire article, I'll share it with you guys for some bedtime reading, is that basically that's not happening, that COVID is predicted to last through the 20s. So like we're in 2022, so it's going to last for the rest of, all the way up to 2029, I guess, and beyond. So it's just that one of those things that is going to, or has already changed life beyond, there's no going back. And I think people are still holding on, Premier Panton, to this idea that we can go back to life before COVID. And I think it was on yesterday morning show, I was saying, just kind of thinking out loud, that we've got children. I've got a 5-year-old. She's not going to remember a life before COVID because she's not going to have any of those memories. For the past 3 years, pretty much of her life, it's been pretty much COVID, and that will be her norm. There will be some of us, I suppose, who will have memories of what it was like to be able to travel freely and no lateral flow tests and no PCR tests. But how is your government working to psychologically prepare people? Because for me, this is like psychological warfare, right? You've got to be ready in your head. So how are you, preparing people for this is the reality and this is how we're going to best deal with it? I see your lights have dimmed a little bit, but
Yeah, I've been messaging someone to say turn the lights back on.
yeah,
As you know, 8 o'clock at night the lights go off in the building here, and
yeah,
normally that's my cue to go home.
right.
But I've tried to see if somebody will go and turn them back
Yeah,
on.
it doesn't actually look too bad because you do
No,
have
it
the
doesn't.
light on the computers.
I'm getting a lot of highlighting from the screen, and I
Yeah,
have both screens on. So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that is an interesting question, Sandra. And I think it is one that we realistically have not. Here we go. We realistically have not had the luxury of sort of sitting back and saying, okay, we're going to have to deal with this for some time. Let's work on preparing people for the longer term, because it's one of those things that's unpredictable. We don't know whether towards the end of this year we will start to see a reduction in the level of potential or threat that COVID represents. We may have, for example, we may have another variant that comes along, which is perhaps more infectious, but has even less potential than others that we have seen to make you sick. So it could, in the same way that I think historically the influenza virus that formed a part of the 1918 Spanish flu, the same way that evolved into being an endemic sort of everyday thing that we deal with, and less problematic. That may happen with us, but I don't know that we're going to know that it's happening right at that time, because this is something that I believe, we'll be looking back in hindsight and saying, yes, that was the point in time. Because none of us are predicting the future until you're in the future and looking back at the past, and you see, and you're able to say, yes, this is what happened factually. Then you're able to be definitive about it. But at this point, we are hopeful that that is going to be the trajectory of this, but we just don't know for sure. So I think we have to continue talking to people about the need to get vaccinated, about the need to to adhere to the protocols. And it is, I guess, in some ways it's very sobering to people. Perhaps we don't want to create a sense of hopelessness if we start saying to people, look, this may be here for a very long time.
Right.
So we're trying to deal with this in the moment now. We're trying to make sure that people recognize and understand what the health risks are, what the benefits are with the tools and the options that we have available to us, and in particular the vaccine and getting the booster. And that may turn into boosters, because in the same way that you have a flu shot every year, we may have a COVID shot every year. And we may, right now, we haven't had specific COVID shots, as far as I'm aware. But that's how the flu shot works. Every year there's usually an adjustment to. There's a prediction that occurs beforehand, probably using some kind of algorithm, which says this is the strain we expect to see the greatest amount of, and this is the mix, the vaccine that is specific to that particular variation, strain, which we think will be most effective.
I see a new variant has come out of France. That's all the talk right now. There's another one too that began with I think a P or something, that hasn't gotten a lot of traction, but this one on the news feeds is getting a bit of traction. The B1640.2, or I don't know if they're pronouncing it IHU. I don't even know what the pronunciation is. Yeah, I'm not sure what the pronunciation is, but that particular one has now 46 mutations on the spike protein. They're not really certain as yet, if that will necessarily be a big deal. And just last week, I was reading somewhere that, they've been able to accomplish so much with, for example, the mRNA technology, that what they're now looking at potentially doing is sort of working their way backwards with the available vaccines in looking at the option of like there's some core elements to the corona or the COVID-19 virus. And no matter how much these spike proteins change, if they can get, a vaccine to those core elements that will help in that regard, maybe they will have a potential medical breakthrough for future variants and just sort of infections overall. So I know the medical field hasn't stopped just because we have vaccines available. They're constantly trying to develop, new treatments, new drugs. And I think as we go through this pandemic, all of those things will become available at some point in time to us. I think knowing that there's some hope is important.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot to be hopeful for in terms of the treatments. We've recently had the approval in the US for the Pfizer pill, which I think is a 5-day treatment that you start as soon as you start feeling the symptoms, and I believe that is regarded as being almost or pretty much close to being as effective as the vaccine may be, in terms of keeping people healthy. Obviously, once you start taking it, you have already been infected.
Right.
So the bottom line is the vaccine is still the best option, but those pills can help people when they do get infected and they do get ill. We have the Merck one as well, although the Merck one is there are issues with that in relation to its ability to assist with Omicron in particular, because it has the same issues around being less effective as the monoclonal antibody treatments. But we also have some really new vaccines that are coming out that are, I don't know when they're going to be available, obviously, but they have ease of use, ease of storage, ease of transport, and they're fairly protective. I don't know if they're as high as Pfizer. I think Pfizer is one of the highest ones out there, Pfizer and Moderna, and that represents obviously the two messenger RNA technology based vaccines. But the others are the other two that I've seen seem to be fairly good as well. And the difference with those, the game-changing potential for those, is that with Pfizer and I believe Moderna, you've got to have very controlled cooling, whereas with these newer ones that are equally effective or similarly effective, you can store them in a refrigerator, and they're much easier to make in some cases. They're cheaper to make, they're cheaper to transport, they're cheaper to store, and so the truth is that globally we are going to be in a much better place once we start getting the vaccine distribution across the world, because then the potential for variants of concern and for pockets of infection to spread out from other places gets reduced. That's the reality, and until we get to that point where we have a substantial number of people in the world, across the world, vaccinated, we are probably going to continue to have flare-ups and issues along the way, and the potential for really bad variants of concern to our mutations to occur. And this is going to be these types of vaccines that are easy to distribute, easy to store, easy to transport, and inexpensive to make. They're going to be key to solving that problem.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot to be, a lot to continue to be hopeful for. What we just don't know is, what the trajectory is and when this may become less of an issue for us. Right now, as I've said, our high point I think about a month and a half, but maybe 2 months ago now, was around 29 people in hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And now over the Christmas holidays, we were averaging around 4 or 5,
Mm.
or 6 in some cases.
Yep.
So it's been very good. Unfortunately, we have lost some people, and that is the painful part of it. People that we didn't need to lose, because we lost them purely, I think, because they were unvaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
They made that choice, unfortunately, and you know they lost their lives as a result. It's very, very sad. It's very painful. Um, it's very painful for us as people in government who care about everybody and are concerned about the well-being of everybody. It's even more painful for those people who have suffered loss, understand what it is like to lose somebody close
Mm-hmm.
to you, and obviously, for those people who are directly impacted, the direct families, you know, the mothers and the daughters and the sons and the fathers and the mothers and the aunts and the uncles and the brothers and the sisters. It's very difficult.
For sure. Well, let's change gears a little bit. I know that we want to talk about your budget, but before I get to that, the talk today has been the situation in front of the government building with this lady, Lavelle Marriott. I think the government has given her, and by the government, I mean just everyone has given her a lot of leeway. She was for months and months and months and months by the governor's residence on West Bay Road. She's taken up a position at the government admin building now for quite some time. And it seems like her behavior is escalating beyond anything that could be seen as a normal protest or acceptable.
Right.
And I was shown a video today, and it really disturbed me, and I think most people who see it. And I actually got a phone call saying that that wasn't the worst of it, that she was doing stuff before that hadn't been caught on camera that was far worse. And so a lot of people are asking, why can't she be moved? The police seem to give her a lot of leeway. They go out there and talk to her. She changes her outfits and she walks away like a normal person, hitching a ride to go back home or wherever she goes. I passed her today after the police had spoken to her, and you would not even believe that it's the same person. I mean, it's just unbelievable that she can switch it off and on. What, if anything, is the government doing about this situation?
Well, I mean,
because no longer protests. Let's be honest here. There's protesting, and then there's this.
You have certain rights under the Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, but with any rights come a level of responsibility as well. And I don't think that it should be lost on people that we've got to give people the right or the opportunity to express themselves. They have they have a right to they have freedom of speech, they have freedom of expression, but it's not an unlimited right.
Mm-hmm.
And it has become more difficult more recently. And when I say more recently, I'm talking about in recent, probably the last couple of months. She seems to be intent on pushing buttons, and I personally believe that whatever her agenda is, and I believe I understand what her views are on certain things. I don't share those views by and large at all. But it seems to me that she's more effective. I've seen her, for example, standing on the side of the road on the bypass, dressed normally, holding up a plaque with whatever her views are, whatever her agenda is for the day. And it seems to me that she's much more effective doing that than what she's doing on the steps of the government building right now.
Right.
I am concerned that people may get outraged enough to try to take matters into their own hands and try to force her to stop doing it. So as a result of today's behavior, I think the police have now been asked to try to intervene in some way to talk to her. And if other measures are necessary, we will take those. We will pursue those. But I do think that as I said, there is a limit to everything, and I think she has crossed the boundary in terms of her ability to say, I have a right to express a level of discontent or a particular agenda.
Mm.
Democracy is sometimes painful, and the rights of people to express views we can sometimes be intolerant of. But I think we have to be able to do that as a democratic society. But as I said, there are limits, and I do think that you can get to the point where you have now gone past any reasonable person's idea of what is appropriate and what you should be able to do in terms of properly exercising your rights. I think today was an example of that, and we need to address this.
Yeah. All right. Well, Darlene seems to think she's sexy. Darlene, she can take that show off the road and into private residence. That's the more appropriate venue for that. There might be jobs for what she's doing, but it's clearly not appropriate in front of the government admin building. Yeah. I mean, there's times when I actually wanted to go to government admin to do something, and then I saw her out there, and believe it or not, it prevented me from going because I was like, oh, I just can't even, because you feel like, oh, she's going to engage you. She's going to try to act out even more when she sees certain people. And I'm just like, you know what? I'll try to figure it out online or call somebody. It's just gone too far. But we're going to discuss that in the morning show. I don't want to get too much into that on this show, folks. Sanya says it's a total disgrace to women and she needs to be removed, plain and simple. And I agree with that. Sanya, tune in tomorrow because you're going to get some more details that will be very, very shocking in terms of her behavior. But let's move on.
Well, I agree. I'd rather not discuss it anymore right now because irrespective of what she may have done today, she continues to have certain rights, and I don't want to run the risk of compromising those at all either.
Yeah. Let's talk about the government budget that was just passed. So you spent a good number of months preparing this budget. Explain to the people so that we understand how this works, because I think a lot of people don't really know the details of how a budget works. They just think, oh, money falls out of the sky, government does whatever they want. How does the budget process work? So you get elected earlier in the year, and you had an interim budget at that point?
No, I mean, that used to happen in the past, but in terms of what happened this year and what typically happens and what will typically happen going forward, when a government comes into office, there is, well, let me back up. We switched to 2-year budgets, so we have 24-month budgets, and the 2021 budgets would have been worked on in 2019 and approved before the end of 2019, so it came into effect 1st January 2020. And then it would be the whole of 2020 and then the whole of 2021. So we would have been operating under the last 8 months of that particular the last budget. So it's effectively a previous government's budget. Okay. And that's how we move forward. But the process to develop a new budget is one which is very, very labor intensive. It's policy intensive, and it really involves the whole of government working, both core sort of civil service as well as all of the government owned companies like Caymanians, for example, as well as the statutory authorities, all working on their budgets for that time period. And you would typically, coming in as a new government, you typically meet and work through your policy priorities. What are we trying to achieve and then you work out the sort of costing for those policies, and that then becomes the basis for your policy objectives in your government. In addition to that, of course, you have all of the normal costs of running government, costs of providing services to people. That so you're not it's never going to be a zero balance approach where you build up from there. You've got costs already that are significantly baked in, and I think you'll never have a situation where a government comes in and says, right, we're only going to need half the amount of people that were civil servants in the last budget. It is going to be much more nuanced than that if there are adjustments to be made. And it's a managed process. You may see, and I was part of the government in 2013 to 2017 where that occurred to some extent, but it was a much more managed approach. But be that as it may, you've got the Ministry of Finance works with all the other ministries. The ministries work out their policy priorities. The government itself has overall policy priorities. There's a calculation of all the different costs involved, and you slowly bring this significant amount of information together to form the basis for your overall budget, which reflects the policies of the government of the day, as well as reflects the costs of providing the services to the population and the size of the population, the needs of the population that are relevant at the time. And then once you have done that, then you end up going to you go to finance committee, you go to parliament, and you convene finance committee. Finance committee goes through the various budget appropriations, which are set out in the budget appropriations bill for the relevant period, and there are questions and interactions, interrogations on each of the particular line items, and you may have changes occurring at that point, or you may have, the questions may be answered, and you may end up moving on and voting on those particular ministry and particular line items. But of course, the one step I did skip over was the policy, strategic policy approach, which in this case would have been in July. That is typically done several months ahead of the budget itself. So we will have to do another one in 2023, 23 for the next budget, and 24-25 budget. That is where you have, that is what is supposed to be the policy heavy approach, and the policy focused approach in accordance with the Public Management and Finance Act. I think for me in the past, and what I'd like to see change going forward is a much more policy focused approach, because typically what has happened in the past is you have a policy statement, a strategic policy statement, which focuses on the numbers, and then the policy aspects of it are at the back of the document, and that is where you have your strategic policy objectives set out. At the end of the day, what the act actually requires is for that step to be very policy heavy. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And what is it going to cost? What is it going to cost is set out in the budget numbers, the rough budget numbers towards the end. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but we should be much more upfront about exactly what policy approach we're taking, rather than, putting the policy description at the back end of the actual budget, sort of initial budget numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so for the next one, I think we're, in addition to a number of reforms that are planned across, the Ministry of Finance, and the way we deal with government finances, and the way we account for those in control, have revenue controls in place and stuff. The next strategic policy statement, I think, will reflect more specifically a sort of policy upfront approach with the budget numbers at the back, rather than what people are used to, which is the other way around. I don't know the extent to which people typically review these, but it's what's required by law. And I do believe that saying up front what you're going to be doing, and then and how much it's going to be costing you to do that towards the back, is the more logical approach to me. People want to know what you're going to be doing. What are the policy initiatives that this particular government is proposing for this budget coming up? Usually, it's, as I said, it has been the other way around, and I've always found that curious, because the way I read the law actually contemplates a strategic approach initially before you get into putting the budget together and taking it down to the Finance Committee.
Okay. Well, let's look at some of the details of what you've been able to achieve. King says, I'm late, but I'm here. Good evening to Perla. She's also late. She said she just finished cooking dinner, but nonetheless, she says good evening to the Honorable Premier, Mr. Wayne Panton.
So what evening to both. I know King is up late too.
Yes, it must be after 1 o'clock in the UK, I think. But what specifically in this government's budget is noteworthy? Now, I know, of course, the one that raised a lot of eyebrows, I think a lot of people were appreciative of, was removing the tax on certain things, including formula, diapers, adult products like sanitary products, and so forth. But I actually had a young lady message me earlier, and she says, Happy New Year, blessings and prosperity for your family. When are we supposed to see the price of baby and feminine products decrease? The reason I'm asking is that back in early December, I bought baby formula for $11.29 per can. And today, the same exact formula is now $14.19. Barbaric is what this is. And so she's wondering, how is that possible if the duty has been removed off of these items?
Okay, so it is possible. And this is one of the difficulties, right? Because the circumstances change. Nothing stays the same all the time. What we have to appreciate is that if we have taken $2, for example, off the, let me use a percentage. If we've taken 20% or 22% off the first cost of something, and let's say the price remains the same for a month. You should from a month after we've taken that off, and each day after that, if the retailers are taking the right approach with it, and if they are giving the people the benefit of that cost reduction because the duty has been removed, then that price for that product should be reflecting that 20% reduction, and people should be getting the benefit of it. However, what can happen, and the world is never as perfect as we'd like it to be in terms of demonstrating the benefits of this kind of approach. What can happen is that you may have a shift, an increase in the first cost of the product. And if the product cost of the product goes up by 15%, then in theory, you might only see what appears to be a 5% discount on the cost from the retailer. If the first cost to the retailer or to the wholesaler goes up by 25% or 30%, you're not going to see, even though we have reduced the cost, you're not going to see a real dollars and cents benefit to the person who's buying it, because the cost will have actually gone up. As in the example given, the cost will have gone up more than the benefit that would have accrued to them from the reduction in the duty, or what they would have seen. But what you have to appreciate is that because we have given this duty reduction, we have actually caused what would otherwise be another 20% increase in cost to be eliminated. So we're, and this is where it gets difficult, of course, because people feel and believe what they see. And not everybody thinks it through and says, okay, the price would have actually gone up more if the government hadn't provided a cost reduction, a duty abatement or a duty elimination. And, that's where it gets unfortunate, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is we are trying to make a difference. We are trying to make things cheaper on an absolute basis, not just a relative basis. But in fact, when you have prices moving in the wrong direction and there's inflation going on, or there are supply chain disruptions and massive increases in shipping, and therefore the costs go up, it causes the benefits to apparently evaporate or appear to evaporate. So you don't feel like you have an absolute benefit, and even if you appreciate it, you think, well, I guess relatively speaking, it could have been more expensive. But that's not what we want to see. But that's something that's beyond our control, because we don't manufacture locally. It's very difficult for us as a government to have any influence, and probably impossible for us as a government to have any influence over the overseas development costs and shipping costs. And so that's where we are importing inflation. We are importing the costs that have developed as a result of factors which are beyond our control. And our people, unfortunately, end up suffering a price increase, which is, even though less than what it could have been, but for the duty abatement, it doesn't feel like it's something of value to people. So it becomes difficult then. And so I understand when people say, well, the cost has gone up, that means that the retailer has increased the price and didn't pass on the benefit. That is not something that I can tell you that I could eliminate without further review. But I will tell you that I believe that the vast majority of the time where that does happen, it is because the first cost on that product, or the shipping cost on that product as well, has increased significantly, and has basically eaten up the benefits that we had hoped to provide to the people in a real sense, in an absolute sense. But it is still there, relatively speaking.
Right. Is there any checks and balances to ensure that grocery stores are actually passing those cost savings on, or is this an honor system?
I think to be honest, I can't tell you that I know for sure, but I believe, because there is a review that's done a couple times a year on a basket of goods, there is the opportunity for the ESO to see what the pricing of products looks like in the retail market. So they may have the opportunity to spot a situation that may develop. We obviously have the ability to ask them to go out and have a look and do checks to see whether there are benefits that are anticipated that are being delivered, and if they're not, provide us with an explanation of why that may not be the case, so that we can be accountable to the people. But it is it's not always easy to do it. And as you know, I have been clear, and I think the whole government's position is, if we're trying to help people, if we're trying to address the cost of living, and we give benefits to the people in relation to certain products, we expect those to be passed through entirely, and not just partially, but entirely. Um, but we understand that there may be increases in cost, which will mitigate against the benefit, people feeling the true benefit of it. But it's something that it's unfortunate. But if I think what I started to say earlier was, if you have seen in relation to LFTs, I reached the conclusion some time ago, and this goes back months now, that the market was charging too much. Retailers were charging too much for LFTs, and I thought that they needed to sort themselves out and not view this as an opportunity to make a quick buck. I think from what I've observed, the market has, even though costs have gone up in relation to LFTs, and there have been supply problems in relation to LFTs being lateral flow tests, even though there have been supply problems and cost increases, in general, there has been much more stability and a lowering of the retail pricing on them, which I think I would like to say that the market and competition drove that exclusively, but it may well have been because I came out and said, listen, we want to make sure that the people of this country are benefiting from these very necessary tools and instruments, because we've made them duty free, and you will not be allowed to unduly profit off the backs of people in circumstances where these are needed, and your pricing isn't justified. So I think at the time I was on Radio Cayman, and I did make the suggestion that we have a piece of legislation called the Price Gouging Act, which typically requires the triggering of a national emergency for it to come into effect. But it could very easily be changed by going down to Parliament and making amendments to it to allow it to be triggered under different circumstances. I think situations like this, like we had when we introduced, for example, the national lateral flow test policy, arguably that could have been regarded as an appropriate circumstance in which to trigger legislation that would prevent people from price gouging on necessary products and tests like that. So I think speaking about it has had some benefits, but do we have levers on a daily basis that we can test it and we can ensure that the retailers are doing what they should be doing and passing on those benefits? No, we don't. But in a short time, we could actually tell whether that's the case or not, and then we would speak to the retailers directly. We would speak to the industry or industries if necessary to address that, and that's exactly what I did at the time.
Okay, we've got Miss Ann watching us from St. Pete, Florida. Thank you so much. We have Jehovah says, my respects to the people who share in this chat. But Mr. Panton, where and when you attend the society or people that need you and do not attend any of their calls or WhatsApp or something, any kind, I hope you're not so neglected with the people who need it. Being totally disassociated from society is not the solution. Please make known how you are contacted or the day and time you serve your people. So tell us about your office hours. Obviously, I mean, I know you're always at the constituency office. I pass by there on a Sunday and I see you there. But when and how are people able to reach you?
So I'm on a weekly basis. And I will be the first to say that has not been the case in recent months because of the amount of stuff that's been going on and the pressures of work in the office here in town. But on a weekly basis, I usually allocate Thursday mornings for my office, my constituency hours, um, in my office in Savannah, which I share
Mhm.
with the representative from Savannah, Miss Heather Bodden. And that is when I try to be there, um, on, on a weekly basis. But as I said, there have been a number of periods, particularly when we have Parliament and we have other high activity things going on around Georgetown, that that we can't get there. Um, I have been, I haven't been able to get there and spend the time that I would like to. But I have to say that I am my my number is usually fairly well known, and I do respond. I have people that respond for me on some of the other social media like Facebook Messenger, and there people that perhaps I've not had a chance to respond to. That's quite likely. That's quite possible, because I get a lot of messages on a daily basis, and I get a lot of
Mhm.
emails as well, which are things that you can't respond to with two words. So there's only so much you can accomplish in a given day. Um, to be honest, I try to get a clear understanding of what that particular comment was there, and it was difficult to follow fully. Um,
Mhm.
but I will say, and I don't know the individual, um, but I will say, I'm happy if you try to contact me again, and I can respond to you, and then indicate who you are, and that you commented on the show, so that I'll know exactly who it is and what your issue is. I couldn't really discern from the comment what it was in particular. But this is always the difficulty that we have as politicians. We try to be available as much as possible to to everybody, and not just our constituents, but people from all over. And as the way it is in the world today, you get you get people from all over the world sometimes contacting you about a variety of issues.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a balance that we constantly try to achieve, and sometimes we don't get it right. And I certainly apologize to anybody that I may not have been able to respond to. And sometimes, to be honest, it's not that you haven't responded. It's just that you're not in a position to tell people what they want to hear, or provide them with the answer that they want.
Mm. It's a tough one.
Sometimes that's a legal issue, and sometimes that is, um, just a fact of life, a reality.
Mhm. We do have someone also reminding that viewer that your constituency office is also fully staffed and
Yeah,
can help constituents with many issues when he's not there. So I think, to be fair, and I always say this to people, being a politician in this country is very different than being a politician in a lot of other countries. In the United States of America, you would never have the WhatsApp number for the president of the United States, and you wouldn't be sending him messages. And, there are resources,
yeah,
government employees, and so on that are there to assist and to help you. The dynamics change when you're in a small country and everybody has
yeah.
a small country sort of mentality. But most of the MPs and the PAC government do have administrative offices. They have political offices. They've got ministries and so on, and a lot of those people are pretty well equipped to assist you. So I don't know specifically what this person might want to speak to the premier about. Some people think that they can have a 2-hour conversation with leaders in this country about, oh, I just want to give you my idea. And they
Mhm.
don't recognize that that's 2 hours less than, they're able to spend with maybe somebody else who actually needed them, constituency issues. They're expected to go to all funerals, all baby births, kissing. It's just
So
amazing. I
that's
think
bad these days,
sometimes
unfortunately. But
sometimes
um,
the events that people are expecting you to
yeah,
go to, but I suppose you've signed up for it knowing more or less what's involved. But
yes, indeed.
it goes with the job, it goes with the territory.
I can just say, I can reiterate the telephone number there is 943-7652.
Mhm.
The office is staffed. In fact, the office has at least two people in it typically. Um, if any of them are out, it's going to be at least one on the desk, or there is a note on the door. So 943-7652 is the telephone number for the office. Emails are even going to be better in terms of delivery of information. And that is, the email address is community.savnew, so community.savnew@gmail.com. And you can set out, what your concerns are, what your needs are, and that will usually be forwarded to me, or my assistant will get back in touch with you to address that. The staffing will be increasing because I have not for the time being, people that have been working in my office have been people that I have paid personally. I have not taken advantage of the availability to have government pay for the constituency office administrators that I have in my office. But I will be setting that up and doing that going forward. So I actually will have an additional person working. And the idea is that I'll have someone who will be able to spend more time in the community, interacting with people and interacting with me or other service providers in town, as well as having somebody in the office at all times who can address the needs of people who come along and telephone or just send emails.
Okay. So Lavana says, exactly, only in Cayman let the government do their job. Anne says, Mr. Premier and your new government are doing excellent governing. So it's really interesting. I get a lot of, I'm sure I get nowhere near what the politicians get, but I do get a lot of messages myself.
You do.
And sometimes I legitimately don't even see a message. Like I go on WhatsApp on the computer, I scroll down, I'm like, oh gosh, I missed that one. I look for the little green button. And honestly, sometimes you just don't see them. So there are times when, we're all human beings, I feel like, and getting a lot of messages, being on your phone all the time, try to reach out more than once. But I would really, really suggest to use the avenues that are available to you. The politicians have, the ones that have constituency office, which I think the PACT government has done a fairly good job of, all of them having constituency offices. Go to those offices.
Yes.
Let them do what they're supposed to be doing best, which is working on policy positions and getting the entire country, not you specifically, but it trickles down very quickly, the entire country in a much better position. I mean, if they're having to help you plan your granny's funeral program, you would understand how doing something like that leaves them less time. We all get 24 hours in a day to kind of do other things. And I know that we've gotten very, very used to having this constant contact with our political leaders in this country, but it isn't the norm elsewhere in the world. So Kimberly says, good night. I feel this question needs to be asked. When will all NAU cases be reviewed? As there are some persons, including some elderly, who require urgent assistance. I honestly feel that this should be looked into, as there are many who don't need this assistance, but then the people who really do need it aren't getting it. And Perla says it's a good question. And she'd also like to add who's the NAU office working for, because they ask too many questions like FBI. Well, I think unfortunately that's to avoid the abuses that have happened in the past, and then give people a hardship for their application to be completed properly.
Yeah. No, I think, we realize that this is an issue that exists, and my colleagues and I, in particular, the Minister Ebanks, Andre Ebanks, is working on a way to significantly improve the level of services that are provided to the people of the country who need it, and to make sure that we have a system in place which ensures that the people who need it are the ones who are getting it. We need to be able to have a system which identifies the people who are less likely to be in a position to, come off assistance after 3 months, let's say, or 6 months, and more likely to be more long-term in need of assistance. So we reduce the level of documentation and level of information that we require from them, and we can focus them more on the people who have the ability to, with some assistance for a shorter period of time, transition into another productive scenario where they're actually working and fully employed and helping themselves. That's where you need to be focused in terms of making sure that those people are realistically and appropriately trying to find ways to help themselves. And we have programs and policies in place which help them realize those opportunities. It is something that, I've heard from the time I was first elected back in 2013, in 2013 to 2017, I've heard the same story, that there are people who are benefiting who shouldn't be benefiting, and the people who should be getting the benefit are not getting it. This is something that we need to try to address. The problem is, as you noted earlier, Sandra, when you put in place a policy or procedure and a process which helps to make sure that the right people are getting it, and they're getting what they need when they need it. There are times when people feel that that is too difficult, that is too troublesome, and you will hear often, I know of so and so who didn't have to do this and got the same benefits. I some of that is possible. Is it the case that there are people who are benefiting who shouldn't be benefiting? That is possible, because human beings are very adept at finding ways to game the system. There are some people who perhaps are getting more than they should be getting. Again, same thing. There are people who are adept at gaming the system. And unfortunately, I think although that is a minority, what it does mean is that the majority who are being impacted and who are not getting a service as quickly as they would like, because they end up being the innocent suffering for the guilty, they suffer, and they have to put up with more inconvenience. That's the way of the world, unfortunately. If we didn't have people who were trying to game it, who were trying to trick and trick the system into giving them more than they should get, we would have a system that would be easier to implement and operate. But unfortunately, we end up creating a system which tries to eliminate too many things and eliminate too many risks sometimes, and that creates a lot of bureaucracy. So we're looking to utilize a technology-based approach to reimagine how we deal with the social issues and social needs. And the Minister Ebanks, Andre Ebanks, is the man with the background, with the knowledge, and the heart and the ability to make a real difference in addressing these issues. So all I'm saying is we've now started our budget year, our first budget year with our budget, with our policies, and we are working forward on getting these issues addressed. And we just have to give them a little bit of time to start moving forward and improving the experience that people have when they're going through that process. Now, I know, because I see it myself on a daily basis. I have constituents that I have to respond to all the time. I know that there are times when people need assistance, they need support, and they're highly stressed, and usually it's a very emotional time for them, and that only amplifies the difficulties that they may have when they need to get support, and there's just not quick enough movement for them. But I think we're moving in a direction which is going to make significant improvements on that, and we want people to feel that is a real improvement, and that they're being treated with dignity and respect, and they're getting the benefits that they expect to be able to get within the time frame that they expect to be able to get it. And I'm confident that Minister Ebanks will be able to deliver on that.
Okay, so we do have a WhatsApp message that has come in from a civil servant. This one says, "Hi, Sandy. The Mr. Panton and the present government has started to repair the damage done by previous MPs. Tell Mr. Panton to keep up the good work and thank you." And this is coming from a civil servant. And they also go on to say that the community needs to realize that 20 plus years of damage can't be repaired in a few months. We often hear people wanting governments to fix things that have been problematic for a very, very long time, and they think that in 6 months it can be completely fixed. How do you try to manage expectations? Because to me, that's what this is all about.
I agree. And it's difficult. It's difficult to manage expectations, but that is what it is about. And we have to be honest with people. We have to be completely upfront. It makes no sense to try to fool people. And in the past, politicians may have said a lot of promises and said, yeah, don't worry, we're going to get this fixed by tomorrow or next week. In today's age of instant information, don't try to get away with that. Be honest with people.
Yeah.
If it's going to take 6 months, if it's going to take a year, let's be honest about it. Let's just say, let's promise that we're moving in this direction. Let's promise that we recognize the issues, and there are big policy issues that need to be addressed, and we're putting our all best faith and effort into getting this done, and be realistic about when it is going to get done. There are some things that obviously we can find quick wins on, right? And people can see the immediate benefits of it. And that is what we'll try to be implementing. But there are bigger things. There are bigger systemic issues that we've got to try to work on. It is going to take some time. The analogy with a tanker perhaps is appropriate for the Cayman context, and with our seafaring heritage and tradition. And the reality is, when you try to adjust course in a tanker, it takes miles before it actually can change course and make a meaningful change in course. So there are times, and I'm not saying everything is like that, but there are times when it takes quite a bit of time to shift direction, because you don't want to do things too abruptly, because it can cause unforeseen consequences. It can cause disruptions, and I think we are looking at making changes which will benefit the people of the country, and we're going to be honest about it, and we're going to be very clear about our ability to deliver and when we can deliver. I am going to leave Minister Ebanks to be more specific about that, in relation to the particular issues under his ministry, because he can articulate that better than I can, with far greater flair and passion, because he lives it and he believes it. And I think it is wonderful to have somebody who was within the ministry previously, who understands very clearly what is needed to serve the interests of the people of the country, and what changes are required. And that is one of the significant benefits that he brings to the table in being the minister, because he has been there as a deputy chief officer. He's been able to see it, not necessarily just from a high level, but he can see it from a sort of a mid level, and he gets the views of, he's had the benefit of the views of people who were other sort of sitting beside him, below him, and above him, and then he is seeing what it's like to help people in the country, who need these services. So I am very happy that he's going to be able to make some significant changes to help manage the expectations and manage the delivery of services, so that there are real tangible benefits being demonstrated to the people of the country who need the assistance of the social services. This is about social development. This is an important part of sustainability. Right?
Absolutely.
I've created a Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency, and sustainability is not just about physical development. There's always there seems to be a view that if for example you don't stop physical development, means you don't have a sustainable approach. No, sustainability is about balancing and getting a better distribution of interests and benefits, rather than just one particular area. So we may have some development going on, but it is development which serves the interest, a much broader interest, and not just a very narrow niche interest.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly one of the elements of sustainability is making sure that the people of the country are benefiting from what is happening in the country. They're benefiting from the economy. They are benefiting and getting the services that they need in order to have a dignified and respectable and reasonable quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
as I said, I'm happy that minister is going to be able to deliver that.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing from him. Alana says, anything more on the free lunches for high schoolers? So I know it was a promise and it was delivered on, lunches for the primary school children, and high school is supposed to come. When will that possibly happen?
I think that is going to be around mid-year.
Okay.
I stand to be corrected by the minister, but I believe that's supposed to be around mid-year.
Okay. All right, folks, we're wrapping up here. Perla has an important question. She says, when the new government is formed, why the previous ones don't pass their jobs that was promised to the people and leave jobs undone? And the people have to wait until the new government is settled and start all over again with unanswered questions. So I'm assuming, Perla, you're talking about the political arm. Well, I mean, I guess that's politics would be the short answer. When they leave office, they're done. So it's not like you can get voted out of office and then go back the following week and be like, oh, I'm not quite finished yet. Step aside, Mr. Premier, I want to keep working. So having said that, I think that one thing that we've always discussed here in this program is there is a need for some degree of continuity. So a government should not feel like their mandate is to go in and uproot and undo every single thing that the previous government did, especially if there were some good initiatives, because that just doesn't make any sense, and that certainly doesn't benefit the people of the Cayman Islands as a whole.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, unless we feel that a fundamental change in policy is appropriate, and that may come about for a number of reasons. It may be because the previous policy was bad. It may be because the previous policy no longer suits the needs of the people. It may be because technology has changed sufficiently that we can take a different approach. But whatever the reason, we have to consider whether a change in policy is appropriate. But if not, then we've got to find ways to improve our ability to deliver on a similar policy. We should always be seeking to improve that outcome for our people, and that nothing typically stays the same. So technology, for example, is one way that we can continue to try to improve the what we're already providing to our people, and I think that is, that may be a relevant benefit in circumstances where the policy doesn't change significantly. But oftentimes, it is possible to make some significant changes to policy and provide those improved benefits to the people. And this government, I think, took the view that we needed to make sure that the people of the country were actually benefiting more. That the approach to sustainability, for example, is one which translates across the board to everybody, translates benefits across the board to everybody. That includes improving inequality, trying to minimize the impacts of inequality, improving opportunities for people to live their best lives, to be as successful as they want to be. Not everybody wants to be a business owner. Not everybody wants to be a partner in a law firm or a doctor or accountant or whatever. But they should have the opportunity to get a good education. They should have the opportunity to be as successful as they want to be. And understand me, when I say that, I'm not suggesting that you have to do a certain thing in order to be successful. The reality is, you are a successful person if you are happy, and you are doing a role that that delivers a service for people at a fair value, and you're a good person and you're contributing to society, that to me is success. I remember the amount of time we spent in 2020 thanking the people who picked up the garbage for us every day on the basis that they were essential workers. Those are people with families. Those are people who are part of the middle class. Those are people who perform essential roles. And one thing that has come from lockdown and come from the COVID pandemic is a broader appreciation for the roles that we all play in society. And so we support, we value, we recognize those people that perform essential roles, and in particular, those people as well who perform public health roles. That when we don't have any pandemics around and we're less interested. I mean, who 2 years ago, who would have known anything about public health, right? Very few people. Very few people talked about public health, understood public health in terms of the general population. But you've got to make sure that it's there when it's needed, and that's a part of having a country that's prepared to respond, that's resilient, that is able to demonstrate sustainability on a long-term basis, not just having to react in a knee-jerk.
Sorry. Well, folks, it is after 9 o'clock, so we'll take one final question. We're into overtime, and I actually have to go eat. I'm getting a little bit of heartburn. I've not had dinner. Final question coming in on the WhatsApp wants to know if you can provide an update on the conduct law for MP. So I'm assuming this is the code of conduct.
Code of conduct, yes.
Yes.
That is, I promised that if it wasn't by the end of the year, it would be the beginning of this year, that we would be bringing that forward and that is the code of conduct for members of parliament. That is on the table. It's on my desk. We are working to take that forward. We'll be having a parliamentary council meeting, and I'll be taking that draft, circulating that to members of the parliamentary council. We will have a discussion about that, and then we will take it broader to the rest of the members of parliament. But that is absolutely on the agenda in the coming days and weeks of this month.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. I have to go get some dinner. All of a sudden, I had a bad case of heartburn right in the middle of my chest. All right. Premier Panton, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you joining the show today, this evening. Again, folks, you've been listening to another Premier Access with none other than the Premier of the Cayman Islands, Mr. Wayne Panton. Join us again in 2 weeks' time. So that will be the 19th. If all goes well, the Premier will be back and you can have all of your questions answered directly. So do have yourself a good evening, and thank you for coming on the show today.
And thank you very much, Sandy. I wonder if you can see in the background here my cat boat, my model cat boat.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get my finger in the right spot. Here we go. That is my
your gig. Yes.
This is my mahogany gig.
Oh, nice.
Wow. This is done by I believe it's Mr. Deal from West Bay.
Mr. Dale, yeah, he's the gig expert.
So so I've had this for years now. This is sat on every desk that I typically sit at. The cat boat model here, I think, is very, very interesting. It's amazing. This was done by my friend Captain Chucky, who unfortunately passed away from cancer a number of years ago. But he did this in 2015, I think. So it's a model cat boat, and I love it. Just you can see on the inside there, it has a little coil of rope, and it has paddles and all kinds of stuff. So it truly reminds me of our history, our heritage, and what we're all about. And I love having these things on my desk. I leave it behind here sometimes. I hope people can see it. But I know it's in the background and you might not necessarily notice what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for that. Looks beautiful, actually. But I did notice the cat boot. It was interesting that you should mention it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Nicholas says, keep the Caymanian culture alive. Folks,
right.
tune in. Again,
I'm not going to get up and show you, but I also have a 50-foot coil of thatch rope that it was in my office when I was last here as well. So I keep everything Caymanian, everything that's culturally significant to us within sight. So it reminds me of who we are as a people and what we're trying to save and what we're trying to achieve for the country overall. So thank you, Sandy. Thank you very much, as always, for being such a gracious host. And thank you to all the people who have listened and watched this show. And thank you for all the comments and questions. And I always look forward to the interaction. And I think, maybe what we can do is have a discussion with viewers as to what other topics they would like covered ahead of time. And it gives me an opportunity. I mean, I tend to be able to speak to several things with some degree of clarity, but it's always better to be able to prepare more fully if people want to have a more substantive discussion about particular matters. But I always enjoy it. Thank you very much. Much love to everybody. Have a wonderful evening and take care. And we'll continue forward seeking the best for the people of this country.
Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Good night to King and everybody else. King said he stayed up late for this. He's going to hit the sack now. We really appreciate that, King. We know there's a big time difference for our UK audience. Remember, you can always watch a show later on, so you don't necessarily have to stay up late. It's available in our social media platform. Tonight, we were streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as a matter of fact. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Folks, tune in tomorrow morning at 7:30. We'll have our regularly scheduled program. We do have our CMR Daily Buzz running a little bit late this evening, some technical issues, but we promise to get those done every single evening for you. So I'm going to go now and switch gears a little bit and help get that loaded up and ready to be delivered so that you can have your news highlights for the evening in video format. So check it out if you've not seen it. We've gotten lots of positive comments about that new feature, and we're excited to be able to improve upon that every single day. So good evening, folks. We will see you guys tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. And I'm going to go get me some food now.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Cold Hard Truth. Make sure to check Facebook for showtimes and more information and the latest news at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Subscribe to our IG and Facebook pages to get the latest happenings.